Linkage institutions. Unit 3, video 15, the media. Alright, so a few things we're going to talk about in this first video. First of all is the changing news media. So we have some ways that it is different now than it used to be in the past. Over the last couple decades, we have seen the creation of the 24/7 news cycle, in which we have news always on. So you have networks like MSNBC, Fox, CNN, and they always have news on. So as a result, programmers have lots and lots of time that they need to fill giving the news, so they're probably going to end up focusing on things that aren't as important as what used to make the news. So there's a much lower threshold for what makes it into the news. Sound bites in 1968 would average 42 seconds. A sound bite would be a clip of them showing maybe a speech from the president. They would never show somebody speaking straight, uncut, continuously for 42 seconds anymore these days. They average less than 7 seconds, and that number is actually about 5 or 10 years old. I have a feeling that number is probably even smaller today, something like 3 or 4 seconds. So now when they show you news clips, you don't even get to see the context of what they're saying. Sometimes you don't even hear full sentences from people anymore. So again, it's changing the way we get our news. More people are getting their news from the internet, from blogs, from social media sources, as opposed to from newspapers. So this is another major change that we are seeing as part of the news media. And there is a term here, narrowcasting, which describes something else that's occurring recently, and that's when news networks target their news coverage to specific people. MSNBC, they tend to target their news coverage to more liberal Americans. Fox News tends to target their coverage to more conservative people. The result of this is that now everybody tends to get their news sources from one source. So liberals tend to get it from MSNBC, conservatives get it from Fox News. So each side there, you kind of are just hearing what they want to hear. Alright, another part of it that's changed is we've had something called media consolidation. If you're consolidating something, you're putting, multiple things into one place. So what's happened over the last couple decades is that a few huge corporations now own most news organizations in the country. So there is less diversity among our news sources. So the result is the news is becoming more similar throughout the country because only a few companies own all the newspapers or own different networks, things like that. So the news is becoming more similar, less diverse. The reason that media consolidation was able to happen was because of a law called the Telecommunications Act, and it deregulated the media. It allowed companies, huge companies, to buy many news organizations, and so that's what's happened. We also see the rise of infotainment, and so the pictures, Jon Stewart, Daily Show, and the Colbert Report, where both of those, they are designed ultimately to entertain, but there is a growing segment of people who get their information and news from those two sources. Alright, here's a main section of this unit, is the roles of the media. And we have 3 roles that they play: gatekeeper, scorekeeper, and watchdog. You need to know all 3 of those for sure. So gatekeeper, that means that the media influences what becomes an issue and for how long. So basically the idea here is that what they talk about influences whether something is seen as being important or not, and everybody can probably recognize all 3 of the people in those pictures. The reason that everyone can recognize them is because the media focused on it so much that we're all familiar. So if the media doesn't report on something, so view them as you see like that gate there, information being what is behind that gate, and the media controls what information gets out and what doesn't. So if they don't report on things, we won't know about them. So we rely on them to be a gatekeeper, and like all 3 of those examples, things that were reported on quite a bit, so we all know who O.J. Simpson, Trayvon Martin, and Casey Anthony are. They also play a role of scorekeeper. In this one, the definition is pretty basic. They focus on who is winning and losing. So politicians, who's winning, who's losing. They turn politics into basically a game where it's like, all right, this helped the Republicans, so today they are winning because something good happened for them, or Democrats benefit from this. So they view it as a winning and losing thing, as opposed to just reporting on the stories and how things impact the country. They tend to make it into more of a competition of one party versus the other, one person versus another person. An example of this is horse race journalism. This is where they focus on polls rather than real issues. So rather than reporting on what happens, in a campaign, what the issues are, what one candidate is promising, and what that would mean for the country, instead they tend to focus on, well, who's winning? Okay, today Mitt Romney's up by 2%, tomorrow Obama's up by 1%, and that's what they focus on, is focusing on elections as if they were a horse race where you're just looking at who's winning and not caring about the actual substance of anything. The final role that they play is that of watchdog. And as watchdog, if you think about, if you own a watchdog, the reason is because it is supposed to protect your house. And the same way here with watchdog, the media, they're supposed to protect the people. So part of their role is that they would scrutinize and investigate politicians and the government. So they are not supposed to just blindly believe anything the president or Congress tells them. They are supposed to investigate for us and find out whether they are doing their job properly, whether they are telling us the truth, whether they're lying. That's the media's job as watchdog. The media has become more adversarial, meaning that they become, like, they fight more with the government. They come into conflict more with the president and with Congress than they used to, and that's been a trend since Vietnam and Watergate.